We're back, and we're talking now about the issue of the history and understanding opioids and kind of how they came about and how we ended up in this crisis. And one of the main issues we're really looking at in this crisis is what's driving the news on this, which is all of the overdoses. And, we've heard it continues to go up, and it seems like, everything they've tried, it just seems like it just continues to spiral out of control. And I guess the first question is why are these drugs in particular, driving that issue of overdoses? What causes, these overdoses?
I saw a poster, Kim, once, and it said, if you thought our problems were bad, wait till you see our solutions. And that's probably the best descriptor I've seen of the opioid epidemic in the last few years. We've talked a lot about how the medical community got us into a situation where we were overprescribing these opioid medications, oftentimes with the best of intentions, oftentimes with the worst. And as this overdose crisis surged into about 2012, we started to realize we can't keep up these patterns. We're causing problems. And so in 2012, we start seeing in the literature this tapering of our prescribing patterns. And prescribing of opioids has either stayed the same or slightly decreased across America since then. But why are we hearing about the overdose crisis now? What are we worried about? The reality is that we in the medical community, when we tapered our prescribing patterns, didn't screen those who had addiction already. We didn't offer alternatives. We didn't get them into treatment programs. And we didn't give warm handoffs to friends and family members saying, here's a situation, here's what I would recommend be the next step for you. For many of these people, they had nowhere to turn but the streets. And as you can imagine, with the illicit market, there is always an appetite for something novel to hit it. That's where we see the illicit drugs really start taking a spiral control out of hand. And from about 2012 to 2015, we see the spike in heroin across the United States. But the problem is heroin is that it's a derivative from the original drug, morphine, which is a derivative from the poppy plant, which means you got to grow this thing. You've got to transport it, oftentimes from overseas like Afghanistan. You've got to make sure that it's processed well, that it's not filled with adulterants so people get the right high, right? You got to get it across our border. It's in larger volumes than you want to transport. It's a mess to make and clean up, right? They need something easier, something fast-acting, and something, quite frankly, more addictive. This is when we start seeing the spike in the synthetic opioids, drugs like fentanyl, which are not related to the parent drug of heroin or morphine from a chemical standpoint. They're completely novel. The benefit of fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, easy to transport, easy to make, very small quantities necessary. So if someone's coming across our border, this isn't packing an elephant suit worth of materials. This is a couple on their person to get thousands of dollars worth of value on the streets. The market took off out of control. So the initial market was all those populations that were already dependent, but as more and more people started using these drugs for really the happiness aspect of it, right? The enjoyment factor of using an illicit drug, the market went much further than we had anticipated than those that were just chemically dependent originally. And the problem with these drugs is that they are so much more potent than the average drugs we offer in the medical community. People are dying. Last year, we saw well over 100,000 individuals that died of a drug-related overdose. About 60 to 70% of those were estimated to be opioid-related. And they're very difficult to identify as an adulterant in other drugs of abuse like cocaine, methamphetamine, even reports of cannabis. So what started as an overprescribing crisis has turned into an overdose crisis. We just got the 2022 data on overdoses, and they were higher than last year. We continue to head in the wrong direction. But at least things are tapering off a little bit from the rate of incline of overdoses, which I suppose is positive.
Yeah, and as you think about that, I guess one of the questions is, if these are so dangerous, or this particular drug is so dangerous, why do we use them if they're causing all these issues?
The point of using any drug is to have it work more for you than it works against you. And I think one of the problems that I've seen in the opioid epidemic is that we've demonized the drug class. We've declared the war on drugs, which by surrogate means we've declared the war on the people using them. The reality is that when opioids are used in the right patient, for the right indication, at the right dose, for the right length of treatment, in the right route, they are probably one of medicine's greatest marvels. When used outside of these very careful, standardized settings, they become drugs of abuse. They cause more problems. And so right now, fentanyl is used routinely within medical settings. I use it in hospital medicine all the time. It's a tremendously useful drug. It eradicates pain quickly, and it helps people functionally recover. When used outside of that controlled environment, it's lethal. So I would say let's not demonize the drug class. Let's demonize our misunderstandings and misuse of it.
And again, you mentioned the fact that a lot of of the issue comes from the illicit, market, and clearly it's been shown that it's cheaper to produce. It's frankly, it's they can sell this at such low prices that it's almost affordable to anyone to be able to get, and yet it only takes a very small amount of this to cause a problem. And that seems to be part of the issue, is not so much the controlled substance where they know what's in the pill, but a lot of these illicit drugs, they're not manufacturing them that well.
The number of adulterants that we're finding in these drugs is just staggering. We've seen the illicit market really change a lot to help people feel more comfortable that the drug that they're taking off the streets is the drug that they're getting, when in reality, it may have nothing to do with what they're actually getting. There's pill stamps that you can buy on the black market that will essentially stamp your pill to look like an oxycodone or to look like something else you're used to taking, a tramadol. And all it will contain is fentanyl. Vice versa, we can see the opposite, that you think you're taking fentanyl, and in reality, it's got other adulterants like flour, talc, or other harmful substances in it. When those other drugs make it into your system, they raise havoc. I can't tell you the number of situations I've seen where people have injected what they thought was a drug of abuse, and actually it's something that destroys the blood vessels. It's got other sedatives in it that are much more harmful to the body and hard to reverse, or something that gets stuck in the lungs and can't be removed, causing permanent lung damage. They're not toys, and they're not produced with the person's best interest in mind.
And I think that's leads to the next question, which is, what are the current trends with opioids? I mean, lately we've seen a lot of different things happening clearly with fentanyl, and now even fentanyl is adulterated with other drugs.
There's been some reports that upwards of 40% of the fentanyl that's on the market right now can be contaminated with xylazine. That's a scary drug. It's an animal sedative, and this drug can't be reversed with standard mechanisms to reverse opioids like naloxone, the intranasal version or the IV version. It doesn't work. And so when people feel that powerful euphoric surge that comes with the opioid, they're getting the added benefit of this sedative, which also leads to some dopaminergic surges, as well as other parts of the brain being chemically changed over time. You're lucky to experience those effects because there's a good chance you might die in the process of taking the drug. It's a very dangerous playing field out there with what they've done with these illicit substances.
And are there any other trends that you're seeing in this opioid world that's been taking place that...
There are increasing reports of illicit forms of cannabis now being tainted with it. Here in the state of Arizona, Yuma County just posted a warning a few months ago that they're identifying this as well. And so really nothing is safe. There were reports, I believe in the state of Minnesota, of people ordering weight loss supplements over the internet, and what they thought would be something that would change their life truly did. There was a death. And so I would say to anyone, if you're not getting these medications, these herbal supplements from a legitimate source, something that's been screened, be wary. Drugs of abuse are everywhere, and they're out there to steal, kill, and destroy. And
one question that comes up, and based on what you said, is I think important for people to understand, and that is this whole issue of I start taking an opioid, and as you said, you feel this, pleasure. You feel this, for lack of better terms, a high. It gives you something. But what I've heard from people, including, my sons who had this issue and were taking these drugs, is that after a short period of time, they weren't really able to get back to that anymore. They were really trying to take them, well, in my son's word, to feel normal. Could you talk about that? Because I don't, a lot of people just don't understand why would they do that.
Kim, in that section where we talk about the neurobiology of addiction, we go through tremendous detail on what transformation takes place in the brain to give that unique changeover from use to really drive the high over to use to avoid the lows. And that happens as a cycle in the average person who becomes addicted to this drug class. And so I would strongly encourage them to review the whole video because there's a lot of detail in there that we're going to want to explain, including terminology.
Well, again, we've been talking about, what makes opioids so addictive, why do they cause overdoses, and even a little bit about, why, we continue to use them and the current trends. So really appreciate that. And in our next section, we're going to get into more just about the treatment and what can you do about this. So thank you again for talking about this, and it really is enlightening. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim.